Hello Ellsworth children, it's Mrs Thomas again, trying to do her YouTube clip. I'm going to tell you now, this is the 5th time that I've started this. So to start with, I had to start again because I was distracted by what was outside, or I just distracted myself somehow, or I realised I wasn't looking into the right place, or I just said the wrong thing. And then the final time, I managed to get onto the bit that I wanted to do for you, and my phone rang halfway through. So I had to stop again. So let's see, I've turned my phone off now, so let's see if I manage to get through the whole thing without having to stop and start again. Otherwise, it'll be on trial number 6. So what I'm going to do is read a story to you. So I'm hoping to read a few stories to you, and I'm choosing a selection. So I decided I was going to do a chapter book, and I didn't know whether we get to the end by the end of term. And then I looked around and thought, what's there that I could choose? So I decided to do a mixture of things that you might know and other stories that you might not know. If you do know a story, it doesn't always matter because it's like watching something again that you like or listening to a song that you like. It can be quite comforting to hear it again. And I thought while you were listening to me reading, you might want to draw what comes into your mind. What do the characters look like to you? They will be very different to what somebody else thinks about them. So the first story that I'm going to read to you is called The Magic Porridge Pot, and it's a story from Germany. I have to put my glasses on again so I can see. Once upon a time, there lived a little girl and her mother, and they were hungry. The cupboards were empty, the shelves were empty, and their bellies were empty. So the little girl took an empty basket and she walked out of the house and out of the village to see what she could find. She walked for a long time, and she walked for a very long time, until she saw a tangle of bramble bushes covered with, what do you think bramble bushes might be covered with? Are they going to be covered with oranges or apples? Cheese? Don't think it'll be that. What she did find was fat blackberries. These are what we need. She picked and she picked until the bushes were bare and her basket was full. Then she turned on her heel and she set off for home. She walked for a long time, and she walked for a very long time. But just as she was drawing close to home, she met an old woman. Thin as a scarecrow that old woman was, dressed in rags and tatters, her face as wrinkled as an old winter's apple. She looked at the little girl and she smiled a toothless smile. Those are lovely fat bramble blackberries you have in your basket, my child. You couldn't spare a handful, could you, for an old grandmother without a tooth in her gums nor a penny to her name? The little girl looked at the poor old woman and she forgot how hungry she was. Of course I can, she said. You can eat as many as you like. She held up the basket and the old woman dipped her shaking hand into the blackberries and scooped them into her mouth. Those are good blackberries, and you are a good girl with a kind and tender heart. And because you've been so good to me, I'll be good to you. The old woman reached beneath the rags and tatters of her shawl and pulled out a black iron pot. She pressed it into the girl's hands. Here's a present for you, my child. It is a magic pot. Put it on the table when you get home and say, boil, pot, boil, and it'll give you all the porridge you can eat. When you've had your fill, just say, stop, pot, stop. Do you understand? The little girl looked into the pot. Yes, she said, thank you. But when she looked up, the old woman was gone. So she went home with the iron pot and the basket of blackberries. Her mother was very pleased to see her, and even more pleased when the little girl put the iron pot onto the table and said, what did she say? Boil, pot, boil. Straight away it was bubbling over with porridge. They filled one bowl, they filled another, and then the little girl said, stop, pot, stop. And the iron pot was as clean and black and empty as before. They fetched spoons and tasted the porridge. It was delicious, creamy and sweet, and when they stirred the blackberries into it, well, It was the best meal they had tasted in their lives. They went to bed that night with their bellies full and smiles on their faces. And from that day onwards, whenever they were hungry, the little girl would say, what would she say? Can't hear you. Boil, pot, boil. And there would be porridge in plenty. And then, stop, pot, stop, when they'd had their fill. All was well and good until one day, when the little girl's mother said, do you remember that time when we had blackberries with our porridge? Do you remember how good it tasted? And the little girl said, yes, I remember. And if you like, I'll go and pick some more. She took the empty basket and she walked out of the house and out of the village. She walked for a long time and she walked for a very long time until she came to the tangle of brambles with the new crop of fat blackberries, and she began to pick. But, there's always a but in a story, but when she was away, her mother was sitting at home looking at the black iron pot on the table, and the more she looked, the hungrier she felt. I'll just have one bowlful, she thought, just to pass the time. She fetched her bowl and turned to the pot. What do you think she said to the pot? Boil, pot, boil. Straight away the pot was bubbling over with steaming porridge. She filled her bowl to the brim. Stop! But the pot didn't stop. More and more porridge was bubbling over the rim. Soon the table was covered in porridge. She picked up a spoon and hit the pot. Stop! But the pot didn't stop. Soon the porridge was dripping onto the floor. Please stop! But the pot didn't stop. The floor was covered. The steaming porridge was flowing out of the door. She climbed to a chair. Please, please stop! But the pot didn't stop. Soon the whole village was covered with porridge. People were climbing on the tables. They were climbing up the stairs. Please, please, please stop! But the pot didn't stop. When the little girl came home at the end of the day with her basket full of fat blackberries, she saw a flood of steaming porridge lapping the gutters of the roofs of the houses and all the people clinging to the chimneys. Tell that pot to stop, they shouted. The little girl smiled and said, Stop, pot, stop. And straight away the pot stopped and floated on the flood as clean and black and empty as before. The little girl sat down at the edge of the flood of porridge. She poured her blackberries onto it, she stirred them with her finger, and she scooped up handfuls of the delicious mixture and gulped it down. As for her mother and the other people of the village, well, they had to eat their way indoors. But they didn't mind. After all, it was the sweetest, creamiest porridge in the world. And that was the end of that story. So I hope you enjoyed listening to that, and I'll just show you a picture of some of the people and see if this is what you had in your mind when you were drawing your pictures. Now, I did make a few mistakes there, but I decided to keep going because I thought otherwise I'll be here all night doing this. And I do need to go home at some point because my tummy's rumbling and I need a little bit of food, but not porridge. I hope you appreciated my toothy smile, which wasn't quite good because I do actually have teeth. But perhaps next time my actions will be a bit better. But I hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll be back again with another one very soon. Look after yourselves and keep safe, and have a lovely day or evening or whenever you choose to listen to this story. Bye.